Thank you so much, Henry and Wolfram, for the assistance. Hello, everybody. As you've heard, my name is Ester Kamaara. I am the founder and director of Star Kids Initiative. And just as a disclaimer, I'd like to add that don't have a civil engineering background or an architectural background or have any sort of research in this field of construction, but I work with children. And that's as Henry said, that's the angle that I'm going to go with in terms of the education of children and the educating of the next generation to be able to implement the fantastic ideas that I've heard all of you speak about today. So as the title reads, it's an 80-year-old's perspective of urbanization in Africa. The next slide, please, Wolfram. Yeah, thank you. So at Star Kids Initiative, what we do is we work with children who live in informal settlements in Nairobi, and we offer them access to quality education. So that looks like different things in different occasions. But for the purpose of this discussion today, I'd just like to point out where we do this sort of empowering of the children. So you can see at the top, that's the Mukuru Informal Settlement in Nairobi, and the sort of infrastructure that they have. So there are shacks or this iron sheet houses, and it's acres and acres of land of this. And this is where they go to, this is where they live. And at the bottom is their school. So this school is called Mukuru Primary School. It is in the heart of this informal settlement. And you can clearly see the infrastructural differences that they go through or they experience at least every day, right? Or every other day when they go to school. And this is what I'd like to talk about today. So one of the reasons why the school looks the way it does is because international organizations, and specifically for this one, it was GIZ, this government aid from Germany that came and constructed this elaborate, school building, which it's a public school and it looks better than some private schools in Nairobi. And the children who come from the informal settlement go to this school and they experience a difference in terms of what urbanization looks like, right? Okay, next slide, please. So with that in mind, I went to the field and I decided, okay, in preparation for today, let me go and see what the children actually think about this concept of urbanization, because it's one thing for us adults to sit and come and conceptualize these beautiful ideas, but then if there's no continuity in terms of the next generation, then our ideas are as good as being ours and not fulfilling the need of consistent, sustainable development. So we gathered about 10 children between the age of 8 and 12, and we asked them a lot of questions around urbanization. So it was simple, like, what is urbanization? Do you know what it is? Do you experience it? Where do you live? What would you like to live in the future? Do you know what makes construction happen? So how does it happen? And then also the element of what goes into building this infrastructure. And we got, as you can imagine, we got all sorts of answers, which I will go into. Next slide, please. So one of the things that they agreed with 100% was that urbanization causes constructural challenges, right? So they agreed that urbanization, is the aspect of, building and making a place that was once rural urban, or a place that was once not modern, have modern aspects in it, and especially around infrastructure. So urbanization does cause construction challenges. And then they went into, overcrowding happens in formal settlements as well because of this lack of urban planning. There's also traffic congestion, pollution to do with the environment, unemployment, because now we're too many in this disorganized urban space. And then we went ahead and asked them, so what do you think are the solutions? What do you think we should do about this state of urbanization causing challenges? And I mean, because they are children, they do not associate construction, they don't know how to segregate and only think about it as a construction challenge on its own. So of course we got more answers around, proper planning needs to happen. And I guess that does have an element of construction, but better condition of transport, again, infrastructural, but things like involving local communities and engaging factories to use, better systems. And generally what we got out of this was that children do know how to identify the problems, and they do know how to come up with solutions. Now, their solutions are not as elaborate or as, measured or, specific to the problems, but the aspect of them being able to identify and to come up with solutions is something that I hope I have demonstrated here. So let's move on to the next slide. Yeah, and so in addition to that survey, at the end of it, what we ask them to do is dream, right? Because you know the solutions. Why don't you show us what you would want, right? And aside from the aspect of aside from the aspects that we teach them, right? Like this happens this way, this happens this way. But like you as your child in your own space, we kind of give you the freedom right now to dream. So before we told them to dream, we asked them more structured questions, right? So questions around, what do you think is used to build houses? So because of where they live, of course, things like iron sheets and mud came about. And what else do you think is used? So again, there's schooling, it's like cement or concrete or stones. And so what would you admire, right? What do you prefer? Do you prefer this or that? And their logic is not based on this grand phenomena of sustainability. I wish it was, but no, it's just based on a mindset that they have developed over the years that this is better than that, full stop. And so this is what we saw. So where they live now, iron sheets, they answer that most of them live in houses that have iron sheets. Sometimes they are, of course, reinforced with stone or mud. And then where do they think their teachers live? So people who are perhaps perceived to be a bit of a higher class than where they are. So they say permanent houses, mostly flats, either within the settlement or right outside. And then where do they want to live in the future? And this is my, favorite question, because so much is left in their imagination, right? And so they all say they want to live in permanent houses. They want houses that have stone. They want houses that have, access like water running and whatnot. And some of the examples of the houses here, like the Karen estate and the Riverbank estate, are estates in Nairobi that are very prominent. They're well renowned for like having these beautiful houses and mansions and whatnot. And as you can see pictured there, that's one of them. So yeah, let's move on. So with this in mind, right, we ask the children to draw. For them to be able to visualize what it is that they want, we ask them to go and draw what they imagine an urbanized Africa would look like, right? Having given them a bit of an insight of, oh, okay, do you know that, let's say that maybe plastics can be used to build walls? Do you know that concrete can be made from several other things? Do you know that an iron sheet house is not necessarily a bad house? Such things. So we did, kind of spec them to thinking, and this is what came out. I hope you can see, right? So some of them talk about a house made out of cassava, and some of them talk about recycled plastic. Of course, they still have this ideology of like huge skyscraping buildings is what constitutes to urbanization in Africa or in any state. And interestingly, so as we got this feedback from them in terms of drawing, we asked them, and where is this house of yours? Where do you stay? And they say, okay, we stay in Nairobi. And so we asked them, okay, but does Nairobi have all these elements? Like, does it have electric cars, as you can see there? Like, does it already have this? And they say no. And so we asked them, so what if, do you think that this can happen in rural Kenya? Do you think that this can happen where your parents come from? And you could see there was a bit of, they couldn't quite understand how that can happen outside of Nairobi, because to them, Nairobi is this where urbanization happens and the dream of where to live. And so we go on and we probe them and tell them, oh, look, imagine you can build this house and it doesn't have to be in Nairobi because, as you have already said, Nairobi is congested, isn't it? And so they kind of agree. It takes them a while, because other factors play in, like when they go to their rural homes, they do a lot of farm work. And they don't want to do farm work. So they don't want to live there, regardless of a better, living facility, regardless of the thought of urbanization, of an urban rural center coming about. So they associate urbanization with, I think a fast life, right? And so they cannot imagine it back home. And so why we do this, right, is because we as educators believe that children are like pieces of clay. We have the ability to mold them into being whatever it is that we want them to be or to think like, right? And I do study development studies, and I'm often engaged in these conversations around a sustainable future. And one of the things that I love to bring up all the time is the voice of children, because if we do not include them now, right, from a very young age, if we don't begin to mold them now, then when will we do that? When their mindsets are already formed? I like what Kukua said about said about the civil engineers and the architects having this like they don't get along because they think this and others think that. And this is just preconceived mindsets that can be curbed earlier on in life. And so all the information that has been gathered here today, and I think that's my point of challenge to all of us who are listening, is what are the plans of kind of dissecting this into tiny tidbits that the youngest generation, think about the youngest person right? Maybe your 5-year-old niece or daughter or grandchild. Think about them. How are you going to teach them, or start teaching them, that this form of sustainability is possible through the materials that they use in construction, which is your field, right? And that's a challenge I want to pass on to you today, because if children can dream it, as I have said it down here, then they can achieve it. Then it is a possible world if they can dream it. Okay, let's continue. Yeah, and so this is a picture of me and Wolfram. I don't know if you can recognize him, but this is what happened 2 years ago in 2019. And so as Star Kids Initiative, we work with children in informal settlements, as I've said, and we provide life skills to them, right? In all sorts of, across the board. We teach them how to clean, how to be responsible, how to construct using, favorable materials, basically across the board. And this particular day, so he came to one of our sessions and we had about 20 children, and he was displaying this new strange aspect that none of us had ever seen before. This concrete, this that is not made of what we know, like cement, like how does it work? And it was left there, it became hard over a period of time. And the kids kept on questioning, oh, this can really do that? Can it, can it do ABC? They were wondering how far or how strong it is to be able to sustain buildings. And these are the type of conversations that I believe need to start happening. So these are aspects of education. So just teaching them that this is possible, this is possible. Second is exposure, right? And exposure comes out from the aspect of you can dream what you don't know, right? You need to know a bit more so that you can dream farther than that, or dream, in those lines. So exposure of just showing them, okay, come, let us go see a house that is constructed with A, B, C, D, and then they will know that, oh, this is possible, right? I really like what Henry was showing us earlier of like this vernacular, using vernacular materials to construct and just seeing what the building looks like. That to the mind of a child means a lot. So the aspect of exposure. And then of course, engagement, right? Henry was, as he was introducing me, he said that I'm here to make a bet, right, that children can be involved in these conversations, right? One of my, with the experience and what I see is that children are very innovative. They have their mindsets are just not formed yet. They have no constraints. They think of the wildest of things, and most of the time it's not practical or feasible, but once in a while, it is magical, it is transformative. And Kukua also mentioned this in terms of like, who are we, constructing for? Do they have a say in how things are going? I particularly liked also the aspect of the unformalized, right? Because of working with these children who live in informal settlements, there's a way things are done, and there's a way that they would only them in their innocent state would be able to express it to somebody who's doing research on things like this, because they live it in their day-to-day lives. So there's the aspect of engagement as well. And I'd like to propose this to you all as well: the education, the exposure, and the engagement. Yep, and that is all for my presentation. Thank you very much. You can go to the next slide. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Esther. Great talk. I think we have a question from Kolowole. Oh yes, you read? No, he's asking, don't you think that the social status of these children could influence their decision and their response? And did you compare your experience with those children with relative higher social status?
Yes, I agree. Just to answer the question, I agree that their social status does have an effect on how they think, on how they answer questions regarding urbanization in Africa. So because of, the particular children we work with do live in poverty, they don't have access to a lot of information, right? And that's the aspect of exposure as well that I talked about. So it is influenced by where they come from, right? And what they see as the dream, if we can call it that, right? And so they're able to answer from a point of wanting more out of it. Whereas children, maybe from a higher class we even still within Kenya, would be able to answer it from a more informed perspective. Like maybe they would see that indeed you can have an urbanized house in the rural area, and it doesn't necessarily mean a bad form of life. So yeah, and thank you for that question.
Do you see the next comment or question from?
I see from M. Otieno, I believe a fellow Kenyan. Do you partner with any higher education institutions? So unfortunately, at the moment, we do not, but we are open to it and would love to partner with universities, because again, education, right? Just to see the cycle of education going down generation after generation is indeed what we hope for. So yes.
Thanks. And about papers, do you have a paper?
Sorry, do you have an article up somewhere in your focus and group exercise? I don't imagine. So Kukua, no, we don't have anything published yet, but I guess I can share my email and we can have conversation about it, and I'll be glad to help get any sort of information.
And then Wolfram is asking how we can go from kids to universities.
Yeah, that would be very interesting, right? Even to see just how the university students or lecturers are able to articulate what they know and break it down to tiny pieces. And that often is the challenge, like how to break down this information that, is so rich because it's years and years of research and historical contexts, but then to break it down into a way that a child can understand. But I think that would be great. Oh, I see a follow-up question about a contest and children versus students. We get a problem, let us see who would win. I think that would be interesting, and I'm willing to bet on the children.
2 more.
Good job. I used your model to start something similar in South Africa. Would love to collaborate. Oh, this is fantastic. I'd love to collaborate as well with you. We'll keep in touch. I'll share my email as well as Kukua. Thank you.
Kukua again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Architecture, so it's
Email.
good.
Okay.
Oh, fantastic.
Here.
It's very
Okay.
encouraging to hear, just that there's similar projects that are ongoing regarding, investing in the next generation. Yeah.
Then I have one. This was about kids.
Yes.
But how long do they remain open-minded? I mean, teenagers are much more negative-minded.
That's so interesting. As a rule of, so we work with kids who are in primary school,
Okay.
right? And this is, of course, the younger they are, the easier they are to, kind of shape this mindset, because it does get tougher. Even within primary school, like by the time they get to 12, you start to see that, notions are already formed. So the earlier, the better. We start at age 6. So, yeah.
Okay. Then we have a comment from Baudouin. He's proposing an engineering competition for sustainable country. Okay, good. Well, several experiences. Good.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody.
Anything more? Okay, then. Thank you, Esther,